Ladies and gentlemen, Solo Leveling Season 2 is coming out in just a few days, so let's recap all of Season 1 so that you don't have to go back and watch all 12 episodes, even though they're peak. So if you want to go watch them, I highly recommend it, but for a shorter, condensed recap, I'm here. So Solo Leveling is about a man named Jin-woo. Also, just going to go ahead and preface it. If I mispronounce people's names, I am terribly, terribly sorry. So anyway, Jin-woo is a hunter, and hunters in the world of Solo Leveling have the role of going into these portal dungeon gates. It's pretty much a video game, and you go and kill monsters, and then you fight a boss, and then you win, and you get money. Kind of. You get things that you can sell for money. Now, in order to become a hunter, you have to be classified a certain rank. The ranks are E, D, C, B, A, and, shocker, S tier. E being the worst and S being the best, obviously. Now, you are assigned a rank just naturally. You go up, you get your rank tested, whatever rank you get, that's what you're stuck with. So if you are given an S rank off rip, you're already going to be extraordinarily powerful and very, very valuable in the world of hunting. However, if you're given an E rank, you are permanently going to be an E rank, and you are not much help to anybody. Now, at the beginning of the series, our protagonist, Jin-woo, is an E rank, so he is very, very weak, and not only is he very, very weak as an E rank, he is called the weakest hunter in all of mankind. Now, the show begins with an island called Jeju Island, or Jeju, again, pronunciation, I don't know, and there's these giant red ants fighting these hunters. Now, the hunters are having a very difficult time until they are saved by a couple of S-rank hunters. There's not a lot of S-rank hunters out there, but they save them, and then they eventually leave. Not a lot of stuff is given about this island because it'll be important later, so don't forget about it. Then we cut to Jin-woo, who is our main character, and he is going into a dungeon to earn his living. Now, again, Jin-woo is very, very weak, so he's just there to kind of fill out the minimum required amount of hunters to go into a gate. And he's very clearly having a very difficult time. He's fighting goblins, or really the goblins are fighting him, and they are putting in the work. He can maybe take out one or two before he gets tired or stabbed, and so he's not much of a help, but luckily his friend is there and she's healing him. On the topic of his friend, whose name is Lee Joo-hee, there are different classes of hunters. There are healers, assassins, mages, I think they're called like tanks, pretty much people who just do melee damage. You know, again, this is all very much like a video game. That's the entire point. So it's Jin-woo, Lee Joo-hee, and all the other people going through this gate, and eventually they finish it. They complete it, they beat the boss, but then a very unusual thing happens. An additional gate appears while they are inside this current dungeon, and so they are given the option to journey further and potentially get more loot, or they can just leave, play it safe, and get the loot they've gotten. So they take it to a vote, and Jin-woo is the deciding vote on whether or not they will proceed. Because he needs the money, he decides to go forth. So they move on into this next dungeon, the entire group. However, it's a little bit different than normal. It's a room full of giant statues and seemingly no enemies. Only to find out the statues are the enemies, and this dungeon is unlike anything that they have ever encountered before. This is the Kartanon Temple, and they basically have to figure out how to survive because they are trapped. Thankfully for the team, Jin-woo is not a total idiot, so he is able to figure out the mysterious riddle-ish commandment things written on the wall by the lead statue that appears to be some sort of king or important figure in regards to the other statues that appear to be worshipping it or just in servitude of it. Jin-woo figures out that the first thing they need to do is praise the god, aka the head statue, and to do that they all take a knee, and then, oddly enough, the statue gives a big ol' freaky grin. The next thing they have to do to survive is go to all the statues in the room that have a musical instrument. There are some statues with weapons, but some have musical instruments. So every person needs to make their way to one of those statues, and then they are one step closer to being let out. At this point, a few of the people on their mission have not made it, unfortunately. They have fallen into the hands of this mysterious second double dungeon. But they did make it to all the musical instrument statues in the room, so now they're moving on to the next phase, which presents an altar in the center of the room. However, it is at this point that Jin-woo has lost a leg. He is now one limb down, and he only has 3 left. Jin-woo decides that the other 2 should leave, and that he will be the sacrifice as he can't walk, and Lee is completely unconscious. So it's just Jin-woo left in the dungeon, and the statues are closing on him, about to just completely kill him, and right before he dies, something happens. Something that no one has ever seen before. A random message appears in front of his face, and it says, "Would you like to become a player? Accept or decline. If you decline, you will die. If you accept, you will become a player. So of course, like any person, he accepts it. He then wakes up in a hospital bed the next day, completely unaware of how he's alive, and guess what? His leg is back! As it turns out, no one knows what's going on, and no one else can see the mysterious boxes that are appearing all around Sung Ji-woo with random bits of information. Essentially what has happened is Sung Ji-woo has gained some kind of ability, and he is known as a player. He is basically a video game character. He has daily quests, which just consist of running, push-ups, and just basic strength workouts, and he has the ability to level up like an Elden Ring character, or like a lot of video game characters. Remember how earlier I said that no person could change their rank once they were given one? Well, Sung Ji-woo has found a way around that, because now he can get as strong as he wants with seemingly no limit. He begins to embark on missions, and he starts to level up a little bit, just doing some odds and ends, some small stuff that's within his little game, and he gets stronger, which is unheard of. Two inspectors go to see Sung Ji-woo in the hospital, and they ask him if he's had a second awakening. A second awakening is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically getting stronger, and it's very, very rare, but it does occasionally happen, and they think that maybe it happened to Sung Ji-woo while he was in this double dungeon. They check to see if he's had a second awakening, and he has not. Now, with all the free time of being stuck in the hospital, Sung Ji-woo is training, and he's training a lot because he wants to get stronger so that he can earn more money to save his mother. His mother has a condition known as eternal sleep disease, which is basically a condition that is a result of all of the dungeon gates that have appeared in the world recently, and she is just asleep indefinitely and there is no known cure. So Sung Ji-woo is earning all this money to try to help her and cure her condition and bring her back to life, more or less. At this point, Sung Ji-woo is just generally much more confident in his abilities because, to be fair, he has gotten much more abilities. So he goes to take on a C-rank dungeon with a group of 6 hunters. This group is led by Hwang Dong-suk, again, I'm so sorry about the pronunciation, and his group is of 6 people. Now, like I said earlier, there's a minimum amount of people that you need to go into these dungeons, and the minimum number is 8. So it's their 6, Sung Ji-woo, and another character named Jin-woo, who is a D-rank hunter who has very, very valuable armor and a very, very valuable sword, thanks to his very, very rich dad. That'll be important later. Sung Ji-woo is a little suspicious of the fact that the group doesn't have a healer, but he just kind of ignores it, and they go into the dungeon, and it's weirdly quiet. It's a little ominous. Everything in the dungeon just seems a little bit off, but it's not too bad. And eventually they make it to the boss's chamber, where there is a giant spider in the ceiling, and it's completely asleep. However, this chamber is filled with mana crystals, which are very, very valuable. So naturally, the group wants to mine them, collect them, and then sell them for a huge profit. If you're enjoying the video, please consider hitting the subscribe button because it helps me out a lot, and a like would be deeply appreciated as well. Thank you. However, Hwang Dong-suk says, "Oh, we don't have our mining gear. Guys, let's go get it outside of the dungeon. Jin-woo and Jin-woo, y'all stay here and we'll go get our gear. Just make sure you don't wake up the spider because it's definitely going to kill you guys." And then they leave, except they trap them there. They blow up the entrance to the dungeon. So now Jin-woo and Sung Ji-woo are stuck in the boss's chambers with a giant sleeping spider, and of course the explosion awoken the spider. Now, Hwang Dong-suk and his group are fairly confident that they're just completely screwed because it's an E rank and a D rank. Of course, they don't know how strong Sung Ji-woo is at this point, and there's a giant spider. They're cooked. Of course, that doesn't happen. Sung Ji-woo is able to kill the spider while Jin-woo just does absolutely nothing and watches. Then Hwang Dong-suk comes back, sees that they're still alive, assumes that somehow Jin-woo was able to kill the spider thanks to his very, very valuable armor, and then he says, "Look, Jin-woo, if you want to survive this, kill Jin-woo right now." It's an ultimatum. Pretty much, he's got to kill Jin-woo, who they think is just completely useless, and then they will let Jin-woo survive, which they're planning on just stealing his armor anyways, and then selling it, again, for a huge profit. Jin-woo refuses to do this, so Jin-woo decides to defend the 2 of them, and unfortunately kill the 6 other hunters who are now trying to kill them. This is the first time Jin-woo has ever killed anybody, however, he did do it purely out of self-defense. Now, the fact that a D rank and an E rank hunter were the only survivors out of a group of 8 in a C rank dungeon is very odd, and it's raising some suspicions, so a few more people go to investigate, but it's not that serious. Ultimately, any of the higher-ups just chalk it up to Jin-woo's very, very expensive armor and just assume that's what allowed them to survive, and that the E rank, Sung Ji-woo, was just a miracle. Now, as it turns out, Hwang Dong-suk has a brother who is very powerful, and he catches wind about his brother's death, and he is under the suspicion that it has something to do with the E and the D rank hunter, so he swears revenge on them. That'll be important later. Now, Jin-woo continues his training, and he finds out that there's something called the Elixir of Life, which cures all ailments, regardless of what it is. So now he's on a side quest to figure out how to get this Elixir of Life so he can give it to his mother and save her from her eternal sleep disease. It's within a dungeon that is S rank, which means you have to be the peak of hunter ability in order to beat the dungeon. He goes in and he beats the opener He beats the very first enemy, which is nowhere near S rank, but still very, very powerful. He barely survives, and he comes to the conclusion that he's going to have to come back to this dungeon at a later time, and that he's unable to right now. Now remember Jin-ho, the guy with the very, very valuable armor? Well, he comes to Jin-woo and he says, hey, I want you to work with me as we go and take down a bunch of dungeons on our own. And we're of course going to pay off some people to fill up the team, but they're not actually going to do anything. You're just going to do everything, and I'm going to give you a ton of money because Jin-ho's dad is the owner of a very profitable construction company. Basically, Jin-ho's dad wants to start a hunting guild, which there's these things called guilds. They're just giant communities of hunters that work for companies. They go out, beat missions, and then the company makes money. It's just like a business. And Jin-ho wants to become more qualified in order to impress his dad, so that's why he wants to go do all these little missions with Jin-woo. Jin-woo takes another job. It's with a D rank dungeon, and when he gets there, he's quite surprised to find out that all the people that he's going to be going into the dungeon with are all the survivors of the double dungeon incident. It's pretty awkward, and everyone's a little uneasy, especially since they abandoned Jin-woo in the dungeon. The only reason that they're alive was because they thought he was going to die, but here he is, right before them. Except they aren't the only ones going to do the dungeon. There's also a mysterious man with purple hair, whose name I don't remember. That's him right there. And he's with 3 convicts. And basically he's like, hey, these convicts are going to do this dungeon with us because if they do it successfully and they have good behavior, then they're going to get some time off of their sentences, and I'm going to supervise them. Don't worry, I'm a B rank hunter. It'll be fine. This is a little off-putting, but everyone is generally okay with it. They just decide to avoid the convicts at all costs. They go into the dungeon, and as it turns out, the convicts are there for a very specific reason. This B rank hunter, who is an assassin type hunter, has made a deal with a man to kill these 3 convicts in order to get revenge for this random guy's wife's suicide, which happened because she was assaulted by one of the 3 convicts. So the assassin hunter is going to kill them in the dungeon and then just blame it on the monsters in the dungeon. Now the B rank hunter does this and he kills them with ease. It's not a challenge, but then the other people in the dungeon happen to find them and they're like, hey, what are you doing? This is wrong. So then the assassin type hunter just kills them too. Jin-woo, Lee, and Chi-yul, also I think I should be calling her Juhee, not Lee. I think that's her last name. I don't fully understand the naming system and I apologize for that. But Chi-yul, Jin-woo, and Juhee find the B-rank hunter and they confront him. Chi-yul fights him and he loses, so then Jin-woo takes over. However, the B-rank hunter doesn't think anything of him because he's an E-rank. Of course, much to his chagrin, Sung Jin-woo is actually a big problem, and then shocker, the main character beats the villain. Now they make it out of the dungeon and it is a little suspicious that the B rank hunter that was with them is dead, but then an E rank and then a healer and a guy with 1 arm did survive. So they are questioned a little bit, but they just say that he turned on them, he killed the convicts, so then Chi-yul had to kill him, and that was that. Jin-woo and Ji-ho do their little agreement and they're going out and doing all these random missions with just this group of technically hunters, but they can't really hunt anymore. They're either kids, injured, addicted to like alcohol or pain medicine or something, and so they're just tagging along for the ride. In all of this, Jin-woo is leveling up consistently and he's growing much, much stronger. He's not fully at the level of S rank yet, but he is getting there. It's at this point that Jin-woo gets the opportunity for a job change quest from his little video game HUD. First thing he encounters is a bunch of armor type beasts who resemble all of the people he has fought in recent memory. So there's people like an assassin type build, there's some mages from the Hwangdong Sek fight. There's just a lot of beasts that very much resemble the fighting style of the people he's fought previously. He fights all of them and he wins, and he comes across a knight named Igris. Igris is in full red. He is very, very cool looking, and the 2 of them begin to duel, and it is quite intense. This is one of the best animated fights of the year, so if you're going to revisit something of this season without watching the whole thing, watch this scene again. The 2 of them fight, and then Sung Jin-woo wins. Jin-woo gets all of Igris' gear, which includes an S-rank helmet for him, which is the first piece of S-rank equipment he's gotten, and at this point, the job change quest is not over. A wave of armored type beasts appear, and there's just too many to count. Sung Jin-woo is completely outnumbered. However, he is thankfully saved by the bell because he did not do his daily quest. Every day he has to do a daily quest. If he doesn't do it, he has a penalty that he has to deal with, which is just like running for 4 hours straight, which actually allows him to recuperate from fighting all of the armored type beasts, so he's able to go do that. Then he comes back with a plan. He's like, okay, I have to win. So he somehow manages to destroy all of them. He gets very lucky. Basically, his hard work triumphs over them. And then, after the success of the dungeon, he is given the ability to change his job to that of a necromancer. He initially declines because a necromancer is a mage type class, and he doesn't want to deal with that because he hasn't been leveling up his intellect class. He's just been focusing on strength, endurance, stamina, stuff like that. However, the game is literally like, hey, you should reconsider. This is pretty cool. So he takes it, and in it, he gets the ability to resurrect the things that he has beaten in the past, and they will fight for him. So necromancy, which means he can resurrect Egress and Egress will fight for him, which is exactly what happens. Then at the very end of the episode, we see the people that were talking about the Jeju Island, you know, some of the S rank, some of the higher ups in this world of hunting that have had a few scenes here and now throughout the season, but overall haven't been that important. They're going back to Jeju Island only to find out that the ants and the beasts on this island have gotten much stronger. And that's where the season ends. I did leave out some minor details here and there, but nothing too crazy. You get the general idea of what's going on, and you are ready to move in to season 2, which comes out this Saturday on January 4th. I haven't read the manhwa. I have no idea what's going to happen in this upcoming arc, but I am very, very excited, and I will keep you guys updated with weekly reviews on the episodes, and I can't wait for that to happen. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Subscribe for more.